is a lamp to our feet and a light to our path. Let these words, let our meditations and our actions serve to proclaim the word on this day. Amen. Did you know that in spite of all of the shelters and the single room occupancies and all of the opportunities for people to find places to sleep, there are 2,000 people homeless in the downtown east side? Did you know that Palestinian refugee camps began in 1948 after the war? There are 8 of them on the Gaza. 1.2 million people live in those refugee camps. Did you know that 1 in 7 Canadian children lives below the poverty line? Ranking Canada 15th out of 17 of the wealthiest countries. Scandinavian countries have the lowest child poverty rates. According to the United Nations Development Program, 99.3% of Canadians have access to clean running water, the largest such percentage in the world. But in 113 of Canada's 633 reserves, the water is unsafe to drink and it smells like sewage. In some communities, access to running water has only been in place since 1996. Do you know that fentanyl deaths doubled from the previous year, last year? It is the worst drug addiction. Did you know Canada's prison population is now at its highest level ever, even though the crime rate has been diminishing? 10 years ago, the number of inmates in federal prisons was less than 13,000. Now it's well over 16,000. Anyone overwhelmed? Anyone saying, I thought worship was supposed to be pleasant. I thought it was supposed to make me feel better. Anyone got a storm brewing inside themselves a little bit? How many want to just go home? Back to your homes, back to your lives, and pray that somebody else has got that? How many are doing that this morning? Come on, fess up. I am. So, what do you remember about the story Judith read this morning? What do you remember about it? What stands out for you? Hello?
Hello. Testing.
What stands out for you? Just holler out. The fact that it was a miracle. Feeding a multitude. The difference between fear and trust, you noticed that? We'll get to that. She's an A+ student. What else did you notice?
That it came out of a place of compassion.
Came out of a place of compassion. I don't think this is a miracle about food at all. I don't think this is a miracle about 5,000 people getting whatever it is they needed to eat that day. I think the miracle is the difference between one person's action and another person's actions. What did the disciples do when they encountered this crowd? Do you remember the verbs attached? So that's how you know what the action is. When you see disciples and you see a verb attached to it, that's action. What were the verbs attached to the disciples in this story? Anybody remember? They came to Jesus when they saw that they might be hungry, And what did they say? They said, go, you, Jesus, send them away to the towns and villages where they can buy food for themselves. Go off, Jesus, and do our dirty work, because we don't want to tell them to go away. You tell them to go away. Right? Then what did they do? They complained about their scarcity. We've got nothing but 2 fish and 5 loaves. What are you talking about? Comparatively, then, what were the verbs attached to what Jesus did in this encounter with the crowd? What was the first verb? Okay, waves people, you can't talk. What was the first verb?
Sit. He told the crowd to sit.
That was about the third verb. It's okay, it's a verb, and awesome. He saw them. When Jesus saw the crowd, he what? Had compassion for them. And then what did he do? Cured their sick. The first thing Jesus does is sees them and has compassion. I'm going to quote my lovely professor Janet Gear right now, who says, our capacity to see the world the way it is, in all of its horror and all of its beauty, and our ability to sustain our gaze on that world, is precisely the measure for our capacity for God. Our capacity to see the world the way it is in all its horror and beauty, and our ability to sustain our gaze on that world is exactly the measure for our capacity for God, according to Janet Gear. Think of all the people that you pass in Lower Lonsdale with a cup out, or the downtown east side, or Robson Street, or Burrard Street, or Granville Island. All those cups you pass, with a person attached to them. I don't even look at them when I say, I don't have any change. Jesus saw the crowd and had compassion. Then what did he do? Getting close to the verb there. He ordered them to sit down. Now, when was the last time you heard Jesus ordering anybody? Sit down! But that's what it went like. And then what did he do? He took the 5 loaves. He looked to heaven, as if heaven is in the sky. Kind of was, probably. And he broke it. And he blessed it. What does that look like, friends?
Communion.
Hello? This is a liturgical moment in the community, right? The story that's getting told is somehow bread is broken. Cool. He broke bread. And he gave it. And everybody was fed. There were 12 baskets of leftovers. Let's not have a conversation about how that happened. Because this story is not about how they got fed. This is about someone's action. This is a story about seeing someone and saying, this is what I can do. Unlike the disciples who gave the task away, Jesus, you do something, and complained about their scarcity when they encountered this crowd. Jesus, what did he do? He gave thanks for the abundance and shared it freely and said thank you. Anyone squirming right now? Really squirming? No. This is about what you can choose to do. This story caused, and Judith alluded to it, this story caused so much unrest for the disciples that Matthew attaches this story to Jesus walking on water. Now we all look at Jesus and what he did, right? The disciples are on a storm that he calms and says, "Where's your faith?" This story about feeding the power of personal agency had so much trouble for the disciples that Matthew wrote the story of the storm on the Sea of Galilee. I got to tell you a story about what happened yesterday. It was totally cool. Waves is fun. It's really fun. So we're just doing this Bible study, checking this story, and somebody comes up to us and says, "Did you buy any coffee?" No, what? Somebody, I think in our group, bought coffee. I don't know who it was. For the person behind them. Right? Just a simple thing. And what ended up happening? It set off a chain reaction. So everybody bought coffee for the person behind them because they didn't have to pay for their own coffee. We had a woman come up to the group and say, "Thank you for the coffee." She said, "Do you realize I have to go to every group in the coffee shop because I don't know who it was?" So she went around to every group in the coffee shop saying, "Thanks for the coffee." And she said, so in Waves, if you've been in the restaurant, up in the top corner, up on the raised platform is where we meet on Saturday morning. She was sitting at the rail doing her thing at her typewriter. And she, as we were spewing on about the abundance and what we can do personal agency, she looked up and hollered, "So is that why you bought me coffee?" I had a lovely conversation with her after everybody left, and she said, "You know that chain reaction continued for the whole time that you were there." One small little thing. That what happened for her changed her life. Do you know what she told me? I wasn't going to tell this story if she was going to be here this morning. But I'll tell you. She said, "You know, I'm a Lutheran. And some people kind of accuse me of being Catholic because I like the concept of confession. And I like the idea of saying, you know, I'm not perfect and I need to say that in order for me to hear the word." Right? So she likes that idea. And she said, "And what church are you with?" And I said, "The United Church." And she went. She said, "You know, I've always been kind of leery of United Churches because it's kind of like this free-for-all, theological free-for-all. You let anybody in." Which is kind of true. But then she said, "But you take Jesus seriously." We take Jesus seriously. This is a story, my friends, about the great work of love in the world. If our work is about the great work of love in the world, and remember our mission statement, to nurture people's faith by learning about, celebrating, seeking, and sharing God's what?
Love.
Love, not his underwear. God's love in the world. I don't think it's possible to love that which you cannot see. And in the face of all that troubles us in the world, the only heresy is to say, I can do nothing. The question we're called to ask in this season of compassion, which in fact is really the only season we ought to be celebrating. The question is, where is the crucifixion happening today? And how can I do something about that with what I have been gifted? How can I let go of my self-preoccupation that I might do the thing that I can do? Remember, Jesus' cousin had just been killed. His preoccupation was the death of his cousin, and he encountered the crowd. All of a sudden, that didn't matter. Got it? This, my friends, is the call of the gospel. May we be empowered with gifts and grace and joy and inspiration to follow it. May God help us as we do. May God help us if we don't. Amen. Please pray with me. Holy God, you have made us in your image and likeness and empowered us with spirit that we might be your hands and feet in the world. May this story remind us of our blessedness, that we might be a blessing. In Jesus' name, amen.